Harry Potter and the Little Prince, Chapter 1. Harry Potter knew that the only way to get a good night's sleep would be to spend it dreaming about his favorite person. But his dreams didn't stay that way. In truth, the only way for Harry to get the dreamy quality that he needed was to get very drunk. After all, drinking was only really useful if you knew that the other person was going to be able to see you when you opened your mouth. "It's the night before the first day," he groaned at his reflection on the bed. His reflection was in the pale black robes, black glasses, gold rings, and thickly puffed black boots he was wearing. He sighed and turned away from his bedroom to the wall where he had been sleeping for a few hours. It was as white as the wall behind him, and the only illumination was from the pale night sky overhead. "No matter what I get drunk and do, I'm still going to dream about you," Harry thought. You know how it is with boys." He smiled a little and got up to go find a bottle of whiskey. He turned the corner, stopped by the bathroom. In front of the toilet stood a naked man in black robes. "Oh!" Harry felt an overwhelming urge to run away. "Harry, do you remember what we said when we were arguing with the Weasley twins? Look at us, we're going to get married, then you'll tell us to shove our face into a brick or something." "Well, we were right. They did shove our face into bricks, but we won't shove our face into anything else, so we're gonna be careful." The man in black robes chuckled to himself. Harry stared at the man in the robe in disbelief. "Headmaster, do you know where I'm going?" "You're going to the Great Hall of Hogwarts. You'll remember it," the headmaster said, "and I am so glad you are here. I've been looking forward to seeing you." Harry was surprised to see that the headmaster was wearing his normal robes, but he knew he wasn't the only one. He had seen the headmaster wearing his robes before, but he had never seen him in his usual attire. Harry wondered if the headmaster was the headmaster. He wondered if he had been a little too friendly with the headmaster earlier. "Excuse me, headmaster, but would you mind explaining how you ended up here?" "I am sorry, but I had to go get Harry Potter and the boy who lived," the headmaster replied. He looked very tired, but it did not matter. Harry was surprised to see the headmaster had a boy in his arms, and the boy looked at him with his eyes wide open. "Please, headmaster," Harry said. "I can't believe it." The headmaster looked at the boy in his arms, and he looked very confused. "Who are you?" the headmaster asked. The young boy looked up at the headmaster, his eyes bright and blue hair unruly. "I'm a Gryffindor, remember?" he replied. "Yes, you're going to Gryffindor camp. You are going to have a few adventures and maybe do a lot of fun. But first you have to find out what's inside Hogwarts." The headmaster grinned. "Now off you go." The boy in grey robes disappeared. Harry thought to himself, "What the hell is going on?" Harry was still shaken up when the headmaster spoke again. "Now then, yes, Harry, you are the boy who lived. I am sorry you will not be joining us in the afterlife. I am very sorry, Harry." Harry was very afraid. "I am not a Death Eater, headmaster. I am a man who is trying to save people from their lives. I would never harm people, and I would never do what you are doing," Harry said. "I know this is very difficult for you," the headmaster said, "but I have to ask you something, Harry. Do you know how to use magic?" Harry's face was very red. He knew he wasn't supposed to answer this question, but he knew that he couldn't deny that he did. "I'm not a wizard, headmaster. I can neither fly nor do things. I am a human." The headmaster smiled. "Well, we won't know until tomorrow." Harry looked really frightened. Harry took out a scroll from his robes and said, "In short, can't do any of that shit unless you have magic training. I can't give you a wand either." "Oh, I know, Harry," the headmaster laughed. "It's just a little too dangerous to do that." Harry felt his chest tighten in embarrassment. The headmaster laughed again and again. And so began Harry's first real year at Hogwarts, and the year of him being killed. Chapter 2. When the students arrived for lunch one day, it had already been a week since the headmaster had spoken to Harry, and he was still reading from that first night. It's raining, Harry thought as he walked through the clearing where the last of the students, the ones who hadn't been killed yet, left to return to their dorms for the day. He felt the first of the raindrops on his face, and the thought came to him, I need to go see if any of them got wet. He was about to continue to the clearing when he saw a small figure walking down the path, a thin boy with the thin skin of a boy of his age. Oh, hi there! Hey, Harry, the boy said, and Harry turned around to find Hermione standing next to him, trying to keep her cool as she watched the rain pour down upon the small boy. So, did you hear about the accident I had? She asked, looking over at the boy. No, I was just thinking about the weather again, Harry admitted, trying to be as upbeat as possible. I got my first kiss, and I got a few other injuries. What did you do to hurt yourself? Did you get punched or anything like that? Hermione asked, trying not to be too shocked or defensive. It probably felt like a breeze just coming out of nowhere. It's just, I'm not very good at kissing, so I didn't have as many opportunities with men as I thought I would have, Harry said, his face contorting slightly. That must be frustrating for you, Hermione said, still trying to keep an even tone of voice. I thought you were better with girls. You were really pretty with Draco. Harry blushed, trying to think of any reason why she might think that. He's so handsome, but I feel like I'm going to regret that one. I'll take that as a compliment, Hermione agreed, and she put her hand on the small boy's shoulder, which caused him to turn and look at her, before turning back to watch her. Hermione was surprised to see Harry smile, although she didn't recognize it as anything she was used to. She turned back to the boy, and his face lit up with excitement when he looked up to see his girlfriend standing there looking down at him. Oh, Harry, this is my new boyfriend. I hope you know him, she began sweetly. She put her hand on Harry's shoulder, and his heart stopped for a moment as Hermione's gaze focused onto his eyes. They were so bright that he felt like he was looking into an abyss of light, and he was happy that she was able to do that. Harry was speechless, his mouth full of what sounded like candy, his eyes wide as he stared at her. Hermione was surprised when she saw Harry blushing. She looked down at her boyfriend in confusion and sighed, and pulled his hand from between her legs. Well, I guess you'll have to get used to him. But I really like him. He's really sweet and funny and interesting, she explained softly, her voice almost inaudible to Harry. Her small boyfriend started laughing at the idea, causing her to laugh as well. Oh, come on, Hermione. We have just begun to make our friendship something that we both love and both need to spend time with. Not only that, but you're my first girlfriend and I need you to be the best girl that I've ever met. You'll do everything in your power to make sure that I don't regret having you for over a year, he warned seriously. Harry laughed nervously. Oh, yeah, that's kind of how I am with girls. It's just kind of weird at the beginning, he said quickly. Hermione smiled at him, and when he looked up, she was gone. But Hermione's smile was still there. It was one of those smiles where Harry's heart felt so heavy it was practically burning. Hermione's small boyfriend was now naked, and he was grinning. What the hell was that all about? He teased. Harry decided he better had to leave. Besides, it was time to go back to class to talk to Ron and Professor Snape about his homework. He waved to the naked boy before him, and he disappeared into the hall. Chapter 3. He's got some talent. He took another deep breath and looked around the potions classroom. The smell of potions made Harry smile, as did the sound of magic. It was something that was on the list of things that he needed to improve on in order to be useful to himself. And it was in the potions class that Harry found the first lesson of the year, and Ron had been talking about how his mother was a wonderful cook, and he thought that it might be useful for him to learn a few of her recipes. Ron had even asked for Harry to join him in the kitchen. It would be fun to try to help him make some wonderful homemade potluck. Harry didn't think that he would be able to help Ron, but there was nothing to be afraid of, except for a certain boy from the Great Hall. Ron, are you ready? Sure, Ron said, looking ready for a lesson in potions. "Let's try something simple then," Harry told Ron, "and make a simple but tasty pudding." "Sure," Ron grinned. "Let's make a cake," he added. Before they took out the ingredients, Ron put down the bowl of powdered sugar and the bowl of butter, then poured in 2 cups of the mixture, and then he was ready to go. Just then Professor Snape was there watching from a distance. "Ah, Harry Potter, Mr. Potter, come here, please," he said as he came out of behind the bench. "Can you tell me what is going on?" "Professor Snape?" Harry asked. "The man in black, Mr. Weasley, is standing in front of you," Snape said as he appeared behind them. "The man is here to take over your house." Harry watched him with the biggest hint of concern. "Well, sir, if that man wants to, he can leave. And if he doesn't, you can choose to stay or go." "Very well then, Harry Potter," Snape said, turning around and walking up to Harry. "I wish to speak with you. If I find you wanting to leave the school, I will not let you go." Harry turned, but as soon as he spoke, Snape was back behind him, his arms around him outstretched. "So, Snape?" Harry asked, trying to put the words together. "I have nothing to tell you," Snape said, stepping back and taking out a small brown box. "What the fuck does this box contain?" Harry asked, bewildered. "This," Snape said, handing Harry the box. "The last piece of the puzzle. This is the thing that will bring all peace to all of you, Harry." "But why would you want to bring peace to all of us?" Harry asked, aghast. "Why would you want to turn us into some kind of dark, evil entity?" He put the box into his pockets, holding on to it for dear life. Snape pulled out another box. This one contained a small glass of wine. Harry took the wine and placed it in his mouth. "Now," Snape said. Harry saw the look on Snape's face and saw how angry his face was. "I will need you to fill this box, Harry. Now!" Harry took the small white box and filled it with water, filling it until the bottle of water was empty. Harry held the bottle up and it fell out of his hand onto the floor. "You are not a person, Harry," Snape said as Harry walked away and sat down, looking at the empty bottle of water lying on the floor. "You aren't even a human being." "No," Harry said, and then he turned to Snape and whispered, "Why should I be? Why should anyone be?" "You're going to die," Snape said softly. "You're going to die here, Harry." "Oh, thank Merlins," Harry said, and then he put his head down and lay there. Ron Weasley smiled slightly. "Well, if you're gonna die, you better get off your ass." "Ron," Harry said quietly, "we need to make sure no one else dies, okay? Not just me." "I've already been here and done this before," Snape said as Harry sat up, eyes still closed. "I'm going to make this pretty good. You don't have to do anything, Harry. Just sit there and pretend to be okay." Harry nodded. He felt as if he were going to have a nervous breakdown. This was his first lesson, that he should just keep quiet and pretend to be okay. He had to do this. Chapter 4. Harry and Draco. The next day, Harry was in the library, studying the first textbook he had bought. He wasn't really sure what it was about, but he was hoping to learn something he would never understand, and maybe help Draco find the secrets of his life. Harry knew he couldn't avoid Draco's presence for very long. Harry didn't remember how many times Draco had tried to kill him, but Harry felt like he had heard it about 100 times, every time, that time. In his mind's eye, Harry watched the blonde's face contort as he held on to the knife that was pierced, that had pierced his leg. His chest heaved. Harry knew it was painful, that it could hurt, but he wanted to keep his promise. Harry kept looking down at the knife, and the blood was soaking Draco Malfoy's shirt. Draco Malfoy's skin was silk, Harry thought. He wasn't wearing it. He didn't care. That wasn't what mattered. He needed to be able to feel his blood again. He needed to feel Draco Malfoy, because he couldn't bear to look at anything else. "Potter, what are you doing?" Draco demanded. Harry was startled from his reverie. His mouth dropped open, and he realized that Draco had been watching him. He tried to look away, but he couldn't. Harry knew that this was wrong. Draco Malfoy took a step forward and glared at Harry again. "Why are you here, Potter? I told you to leave me alone. I told you to go back to my place and sleep, and all you did was scream and bite your lip. But I'm not going to leave here alone here." Draco's anger was burning. "You don't have a right to be angry with me," Harry said. "You're a wizard, not a dog." Draco's mouth dropped open. "I am not going to hurt you. You are my friend." Draco Malfoy stared at him, eyes wide. Then he reached up, pulled at Harry's shirt, and tore it off. He stood up, glared at Harry again, and then pulled Harry's jeans up. "Are you going to give up on me or what?" Harry looked up at Draco, who took Harry's hand. "I'm not going to give up," Harry said. "I'm going to make you my friend again." Draco laughed. "Good! Then just come with me and we'll find a house, and you can watch me as you used to. And after you watch me, you can come and talk to me, and I will teach you everything I know, and I will let you use your wand in all my classes. And you can do things you've always wanted to do. You will not die in my house, because no one ever will love you the way I have, not even your brother." He held out his hand. "You will not be alone." Harry's eyes widened, then he smiled. "Why is that?" Draco asked, surprised. "It's my charm," Harry smiled, and Draco felt the weight of it lift. "It's all that matters now, right?" Draco grinned back. "I hope so," he said. Just then Hermione's small boyfriend stepped out of the shadows with a big smile on his face. "Hey, Harry, do you know I need help with some homework?" he said, waving his hand. Harry's eyes shot open. What homework?" he asked, and surprised, and Draco looked quite embarrassed for him. "Potter, don't you know the Little Prince? He's the one who got into the war. He fought like an ace and he never lost a battle. I swear on the cross of my life that he'll win the war too. He's been a real friend of mine." Draco nodded. "Oh," Harry said, trying to remember what that meant. "I've heard about him. He's great at Quidditch," and Harry trailed off, as if he'd gone through a very painful memory. The prince and Draco both looked at each other and looked at Harry, thinking about him in silence. And the prince was smiling. "Don't worry, Harry. You know your friends. They're good people. That's what makes a difference." Harry nodded. "I do," he admitted, but didn't want to answer anything. "And now," Draco said, looking at his wand in his hands, "for the important homework." He pointed to a large book. "This is the one on the history of magic, and here is a note that you are supposed to write on the same page." Draco started writing on the page and paused before adding a few final words. "And this will be the last letter you will write, and your last piece of advice to you." Draco paused again, his voice still somewhat hushed and serious. "And if you die, please don't forget these." Harry looked around the table and saw that the rest of the people around them were watching the prince in silence. All eyes were focused on Harry as he finished the first part of his homework, and then looked back at Draco, who was watching him with a confused expression. "Thank you, Draco," Harry said slowly. "I'm sure you didn't expect to be doing this. I'm afraid I'm doing it all wrong." Draco shrugged. "Just get used to it," he smiled, and Harry nodded. Draco reached into his pocket and pulled out a book called The Diabolical Plan. "It's quite a comprehensive book." He smiled at Harry and handed it to him. Draco turned and looked over at the group of students. "These guys will do anything for you, Potter," and Draco said softly. "They will even sacrifice themselves for you, because they know if that they fail, that's all the world will know about you. You can choose to stay here and be the center of attention, or just let them all die so you will live forever. It all depends on you." Harry's heart dropped. He was in an unusual situation. "I'm sorry, Harry Potter," Draco said softly, and turned his attention back to the books. The little prince took a deep breath, and then he slowly opened his book, taking note of the comments. "You see," he began slowly, "the reason why I'm so happy to see you is because I'm going to use your power to destroy your world. The only problem is that I'm going to get away with it, because Harry Potter is too young for such power, and I haven't told you what the power is yet, so you'll just have to see for yourself." Harry smiled. "I'll see what I can do about that," he said quickly, hoping that this might be enough to quell the anger and confusion coming up in his heart. "I need to go now. Thank you, Draco. It's good to see you again," Harry said as he left. The others watched him go, with some annoyance, as they knew that he would probably return, so they just tried to ignore the fact that Harry was being so weird. Chapter 5. The Game is On. The next day was the big Quidditch match, and Harry was at a loss of words to explain why it was called Quidditch. He tried to figure it out himself. Eventually, the match started. There were no words, just the sound of voice singing in the excitement. It made him feel like he was in a magic school. "Yeah, I'm in Quidditch," Harry said. "I'm pretty sure I'm going to try and beat Quidditch in the first round." As he and the team got ready, the Weasley twins arrived with a group of Aurors, who all had their marks on. One of them had a broomstick sticking out of his hand and said, "You know, I've never seen anyone get a broomstick out of a broom before." "Yeah, it's just a broom," Harry said. The Aurors looked at each other in surprise. One by one, they turned to face Harry. "You're right," one of the Aurors said. "So," Harry said, looking out of the window to make sure they was in the right place. "Why are you here?" George smiled at Harry. "Because you're here. Because you're Harry Potter, and Harry Potter's like the best." "Also," added Fred, "because we're investigating a crime you did not commit." George's eyebrows furrowed. "I'm not sure who was behind this crime, but if you'd been able to identify them before I was here, you'd probably be able to stop me from doing it now." "Well, I'm in Quidditch," Harry said. "Not a Quidditch coach, just a broomstick. A broomstick that is about to be broken or destroyed." The Aurors were shocked at the statement. "Well then, Harry, I think I can tell you who it is," George said. "The person who committed the unforgivable act of being a brat." "A brat?" asked Harry, shocked. "Are you saying someone's a brat? Like a person who eats the flesh, uses poisons, and steals from the dead?" "Of course, but not just anyone who steals, kills, or causes harm to people. The person did it to the Ministry itself," George said, taking another deep breath, "which makes it treasonous, and therefore an act of war. So if you could catch this person before you die, I would appreciate it. Do you understand?" "Of course," Harry answered. "But who is this person?" "Oh," George said, "it could be anybody." Fred elaborated, "But we have an evidence pointing to one person, a name you already know, Draco Malfoy." Harry's head hurt again, and he was very familiar with the Malfoy name. He knew Draco's name in the dreams and in other ways as well. "Are you certain it's Draco Malfoy? The one in the robes?" "That is right," George said. "He's an employee of Lord Voldemort. He is plan of the Dark Lord's master plans, the mastermind behind many of his worst actions of the Dark Lord. And he is a very dangerous brat. In a few days we will arrest him for trial and possibly death. And the entire ministry is going to fall upon him. No questions asked. The only thing they won't do is let him off scot-free." Harry was horrified. "Oh my god," he said in disbelief. "Are you fucking kidding me?" George shook his head. "It's not funny. It's not funny at all, Fred." Fred shook his head as well. Before Harry could respond, Professor McGonagall stepped out of the shadows. Harry had forgotten about her, but it made him wonder what she would say. "Good news, boy!" she exclaimed. "Quidditch isn't a very fun game, but it's all the way that we play, right? So we need you to stand up there and play it, and the Ministry can't stop you." Harry felt guilty, as if it was a clear threat. This was going to be embarrassing to the other players. This was probably going to be a whole lot of fun. "Well, there you are," George said. "You should go to Quidditch, or something, and show the Ministry what courage is all about. They should see you as one of the team." "I really hope they don't try anything," Fred said, still smiling. Harry shrugged, though it had to be one of the biggest shrugs he'd ever given. It didn't really matter. It was Quidditch, and Harry was already one of the team. They couldn't stop him. Harry took his broomstick and flew away with Professor McGonagall. This was the big Quidditch match, the big one everyone was looking forward to, but not quite knowing what to expect. It had to be one of those ones where the referee is going to give a hand, just accept and forget about. Give a hand call. And certain player is going to get lucky and win, which was the sort of thing a team would just accept and forget about. And Harry wasn't just going to lose against some guy on a broomstick, he had a team. Harry knew how to handle this, and he knew how to win this. He was going to beat his opponents, win the Quidditch match, and make them miss Christmas too. The moment the golden snitch was released, he took off and into the sky in style, a gliding parabola in the wind. "I have never flown a broom this fast," Harry said when he realized his broom was gone. but he knew somehow that he still had it. Harry felt like a prodigy flying his broom up there in the air at an almost superhuman rate. But when he stopped and thought about it, it had never been that amazing. A bludger flew out of the ground just to his right and landed right in front of him. And then Harry looked around. He spotted a few Aurors, some Death Eaters, and a bunch of Ministry personnel. And he knew that at the very moment it was going to be a very tense moment for all of them. Harry didn't want to turn it into a fight though, because at that point he was already getting all the hang of the sport. He turned his attention back to the snitch and took another swig of his drink. The golden snitch flew through the air, a ball of flame bouncing off the top of the Hogwarts Express as it flew. Harry spotted the other team's seeker, Draco Malfoy, looking at him with his wide eyes. "Malfoy," Harry said, "there is the Quidditch match. You're going to score a touchdown if you hit the golden snitch, and you will go home with a large bag of candy." Draco Malfoy stared at the golden snitch for a moment, then nodded. "I'll try," he said, "but you know what I need from you?" Harry brought his broom close to Draco Malfoy. Then, without another word, Harry brought his legs out and swung into Draco Malfoy's arms. Harry fell into Draco Malfoy's embrace, his lips pressing hard on Draco's ear. The moment he closed his eyes, Harry felt the golden snitch drop onto his lap. Harry let go of Draco Malfoy's arms, his legs fluttering into Draco's side as he was rocked by a huge wave of euphoria. "Now that is magic," Harry thought to himself. He took a moment to relax, enjoying the feelings that he had caused, and then held up the golden snitch. "Now, who scored the most points for Gryffindor?" Draco Malfoy smiled and started laughing loudly. "I scored the most points for Gryffindor. Gryffindor won." Harry was feeling pretty good about himself after this match, which was good news since the day before he had lost. On the plus side, his team had won. He had won something even greater. Draco Malfoy was going to be his best friend ever. His parents had done their best to raise Harry to be a good person, but their own lives had not given their two enough opportunities to see where that led him. As it turned out, he didn't really need to think about it very much. After all, the very first step was to always have a good time. As Harry watched the crowd, he noticed a small boy walk past him. It was the little prince, and he looked like the Prince of Dragons, or even just a pretty baby boy. He seemed very happy and just kept laughing, which was kind of strange. Then Hermione came into view and said, "Harry!" "Hello, Hermione," Harry said. "Why do you call me by my nickname?" he asked. "Why, to tell you the truth, you do already know me, don't you, Harry?" Hermione laughed and pulled his arm toward her and smiled. She pressed her lips into his ear, whispering, "I need to talk to you about some important things, Harry." Harry was surprised, as she kept calling him Harry, and he wondered what was up with her calling him that. He hadn't been calling him by any of his normal names like Lord Potter or Master of Death or the Grim Reaper, but he guessed that she had just been curious as to who he was. "I'm glad to hear it, Hermione," he said. She looked around at the crowd and the little guy who seemed very happy and excited. "Good, we'll talk tomorrow when you're not in the house," Hermione told him. Harry looked to her and saw that her eyes were dark and full of sadness. She looked so sad and disappointed. She turned her attention to the boy who was laughing hysterically. It looked like he wanted to scream, but his voice sounded normal, like he was having a really good day. "I should go see what's wrong," Hermione mumbled, her eyes staring at the little guy, and her voice was full of regret and confusion. As she walked over to her boyfriend, Harry was struck by a thought. That boy might be a bit odd, he thought as he walked away from them. He would worry about all that weird stuff with Hermione, but he didn't really have to worry about it at this moment. End of chapter 5. Harry Potter and the Little Prince, chapter 6. It was a Sunday afternoon. After some careful consideration, Harry pulled himself from his bed to find he was still there. He then turned around to see that Snape was still in front of him in his robes, dressed in black. The only thing that he had on at this point was an old black robe that he hadn't washed for the past few days, which was a bit of shame, to say the least, since it was only the day before the Draco's trial. As soon as Harry walked up to Snape and turned around, Snape was gone as well. with no explanation of how this happened. Harry decided to change his robes and then head over to Draco's place. At the entrance to Malfoy Manor, however, he stopped, just as he had done many times before, to watch the crowd outside the front door, which seemed to be going crazy, and to hear the faint voice of a woman who would later be named Hermione Granger, talking with tears in her eyes about how she would never give up on Harry or the twins. Harry wondered for a moment if the crowd that was outside Draco's place were the ones who were chanting, but a group of Aurors appeared, led by one of the twins, and they led Draco away into the crowd, with a stern look and loud words. Draco stared at Harry in shock, and Harry knew exactly what this was. The Ministry of Magic was planning to kill Draco for treason. It was too early. Why couldn't someone tell him this before it happened? What a crazy, horrible day. Suddenly, the thought came to Harry, and he felt anger. He couldn't tell what was worse, that the Aurors knew about what was to happen, or that Draco was innocent and the Ministry was conspiring to kill him. He pulled out his wand and fired a quick curse on himself. He looked up with a pale green glare as the magic that shot from it was stopped with a crack and a screech. Draco and Hermione looked up in shock. Harry had just cast something that he didn't even know how to cast, the curse of green light. The green light in his eyes began to fade, and he looked around at the Aurors, wondering where this would lead. They gave him one final look before they began to run away in terror, along with the crowd. Harry turned around and looked at Draco, his eyes shining bright. Harry had known this day was coming for a very long time. He had wanted it for a long, long time, but he hadn't known how to say it out loud. Now he had to tell Draco, "My love, I have learned the hard way, that if I don't love you this long, my life would end. Didn't love you this long." Draco stared at him as if he had spoken the words for him, and then he took a deep breath and said, "I love you." And Harry felt Draco's fingers on his back begin to warm, as if someone had knelt beside him. Draco gave him one last kiss and then ran off into the night. And with that, Harry sealed the magical bond of love between him and Draco Malfoy. And Harry closed his eyes and cried with a mixture of relief and sadness. He then remembered what he had said the night he had been born in the Ministry. "If I didn't love Draco Malfoy, Draco would have never known how to love me." Hermione, for her part, said nothing, but in her mind there was an emotion that was unmistakable, something she could never put her finger on. Harry felt it. And then Harry had a horrible idea. He started laughing. It was as if laughter came in waves, and suddenly the pain in his body stopped. Harry didn't even have pain anymore. He looked at Hermione with a small smile that he was having trouble keeping hidden, because it was just the kind of smile he would have given if he had been a Slytherin at school. And he saw her face flush with tears, so big they were spilling out from her eyes as if they were red hot. "Hermione, we're going to die tonight." He pulled out the box Snape had given him, and he opened it. Within it was a bottle of whiskey and 2 bottles of brandy. He handed her the whiskey. She took it quickly. "I know," she smiled again, though she looked slightly disappointed, "but we can't let your death end without a proper funeral." And now she was smiling back at him. At that moment the sun was shining through the trees, and Harry looked to see the lake, and saw that there had been a small boat floating in it. It seemed to be a pretty good boat, and it was covered in the most magnificent foliage, almost like a forest. He could have picked it out at any time. Harry had always wanted to be a forest ranger, so this would be his chance. He shared a drink with Hermione, and she looked at the lake as if it was very familiar. Hermione gazed out for a long time, as if searching for the key to the boat. "We must not tell the little prince our death is imminent," she said sternly, "because he would want to kill me himself." Then she hugged her best friend so hard she almost broke his neck. End of chapter 6. Harry Potter and the Little Prince, Chapter 7. I am a wolf's tooth. Harry felt like it was nearly noon, and he was sitting in the great hall after finishing the portions of class, where he opened his eyes. He had spent the night with Ron, as he had planned. doing homework and teaching himself how to read. He wanted to tell Ron about everything happening, but he was afraid Ron would turn what he learned into a nightmare. Ron always did that, to Harry's dismay. This was the first reason Harry had gone straight to breakfast, the second reason he had gone straight to bed again, and the third reason he was in the library garden, staring at the ceiling until he felt a tingle on his back again. Harry could not help but realize that he looked at the ceiling all the time, but there was nobody looking at it from on top of. No one else to look down onto the floor with. Just a lonely ceiling. The only thing there could be was beautiful was the roof on top. Harry, there you are. What are you staring at? Hermione asked. Entered the library garden from her office. She sounded scared, trying to sound calm, but somehow her voice got thinner and thinner over the course of the afternoon. I'm staring at you, Harry exclaimed. He had never tried staring back like this. It made him feel like a total idiot. Hermione's face became more and more expressionless. Harry Potter, she finally said. Her voice was soft and beautiful, so beautiful that he thought she was dreaming, just like Ron had. I've been doing some reading, and we need something called the wolf's tooth for our ritual. And I think you need to ask for the patronus, if we're going to be able to perform the ritual and save Draco. Harry yelled with pure joy and desperation as she continued on. Hermione shook her head furiously. I've researched for the term wolf's tooth a bit, and it seems to have gotten some publicity. I didn't take any pictures or anything, but if you are looking, I can answer any questions you might have. Well, maybe if I have you wait till the class ends, I might be able to ask you one. Harry's mind immediately wandered back to his classes that morning. The things he'd been telling himself he'd learned, they made sense to him. He looked back to see a wolf standing in front of him, and when he saw who it was, he was immediately distracted. He turned to look at the dog who had suddenly come from the garden shadows. Wow, how cute, he said in his voice, and then after a moment he realized what the dog was doing. This was a wolf in his life, Harry thought, the same wolf as Harry, the same wolf that he had always assumed was the most beautiful one. Harry was also a wolf, and now he realized that it was not as if he was just a human. A wolf, he realized, was a person with a mind. Hermione's mind had turned red. Her expression turned very green. She turned back to look at the dog who had come out of the shadows, then back at his eyes. So, Harry said, and his head suddenly turned away from her. Do you think I could be the wolf's tooth? I've been dreaming about that, she said firmly. But I don't think I'm dreaming. No, 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 you could be the wolf's tooth. You could be Harry's tooth, too. She turned around to look at him. You could be your own son. You could be your father's, too. She smiled and laughed. Now, come on, you have more than time to get started. Harry stared at her for a moment, trying to form a word. Get started? I thought your boyfriend, the little prince, was going to be the one to do it. Harry looked up into her emerald green eyes. She laughed and patted him on the head. Yes, now you can be the one, Harry. We both can. Harry gave her a crooked smile, his nose twitching a little, and they both stared out at that endless green. He realized that she was right. If we don't get started, this is going to last forever, and that could be too long. The wolves' eyes gleamed. They turned to each other, their eyes locked in a happy stare. Then each raised the wand, and they both stared up into the sky with eyes that were twinkling. Both of them were laughing. Together they shouted, Avada Kedavra! We won! Some time later, the door opened. Ron walked in with a puzzled look on his face. Harry, what are you doing here? Just what the hell did I miss this? Ron didn't need to think too long on that, as the door was open to the garden, and Harry and Hermione were already there. They were both on the ground, as dead as they came, but both were completely silent. The wolf looked at Ron, who still couldn't quite believe what just had happened, but it nodded vigorously before moving off. Ron grabbed the two of them and dragged them down the garden path to the main tunnel. Well, I guess that's it for this year. Chapter 8. The Rest of the Week. While the rest of the day went by the fast and free, Ron got to see Harry once again after the evening holiday had passed. The funeral and the feast were held in a private chapel, and after a few hours of silence with no one else around, it was time for Ron to say goodbye to his friends. Hey guys, I'm so sorry. I know I'm a bit of a brat, but I just wanted to make clear that I think you should stay here for now, he said as he walked over to Hermione. And I will continue to visit our place until the end of this month. Thanks for being the best summer, Harry. And thank you for listening to me. Bye guys. It only took moments for Ron to exit the chapel and walk back to his home, a tear in the corner of his eye as he thought about everything that had happened. Harry had gone. So what? He always believed that things weren't going to turn out for the way he wanted anyway, but he still felt guilty and had to help him fix his problem. This time his problems weren't caused by him, but were caused by the way Harry and Hermione had treated themselves. For Ron, that was too much. He just really didn't like the killing curse anymore. On the way to the dorms, he was interrupted when he stopped after some fruitcake. After enjoying the cake that he had, he noticed a young boy looking down in his side, laughing. It was the little prince, Ron noticed, that had gone nuts when he heard about Hermione's death. She knew I should be the one to start killing again, but she never told me, he has, as he pulled out a large pair of dark-haired scissors. That was the least she could have done. She knows how much I hate being left hanging over the summer. He started slashing, trying to take care of the pain but not finding his clutches at all effective. I told Harry you can't stop me anymore, he added, pulling himself off the chopping board, smiling to himself while he walked away. Poor guy didn't have a great life while he was growing up either, Ron said, not quite pleased to see the little kid who had gone mad. He smiled to himself while eating some fruitcake, walking towards Gryffindor Tower. Ron was still very happy, despite being very disappointed with this year. He remembered when Cedric died, but didn't want to remember it. He wasn't good at crying or taking care of himself, so he would probably try not to think of it anyway. Just before he reached the tower for the very first time, Ron found himself in the hall of the Chamber of Secrets as Harry's funeral procession passed. He tried to ignore it as fast as possible, looking around the grounds. And then a hand touched him, and he froze. It touched him on the forehead, but nothing really happened. Weasley, don't be afraid, just relax, a voice told him soothingly. Ron recognized it immediately, as if it had been in his thoughts during his childhood. It was Draco Malfoy, and he was the one who had touched him. Ron was silent for a moment, wondering what had become of his mind now, but then he heard the voice again. Come with me, Weasley, this is Malfoy's time to shine, it said. Ron shook his head and walked forward. Draco Malfoy smiled slightly as he led him through the hall of the Chamber of Secrets. Weasley, he said, you have made a very important choice in this life. It is time to do something you have never dreamed of doing before. For it is not possible to imagine the end to this journey. Ron nodded, and he was in the exact same position that he had been in the past. He had felt as if the world was slipping through him, only it was just not that. Malfoy, you're safe. You're not safe, are you? He asked. Not safe, Malfoy said, and he leaned forward to sit next to him, watching him with some amusement. There is no safe place to be now. It has become impossible for you and I to survive. I have only one chance, and you are the only one I can rely on. The only one. Ron nodded to him as he looked at him. You have no friends? He asked with a nod. Malfoy turned to look at him, and it looked like that was when everything went grey. It felt like death to him. There are no friends, he muttered. None at all, Weasley. It's as simple as that. The little prince who never knew any better has gone mad. He betrayed me, and now he wants me gone. Ron was silent for a moment. What? Ron asked, confused. Draco looked at him, looking straight at him and not letting his eyes move. Weasley, you said you weren't stupid, didn't you? I'm not stupid, Ron said, shaking his head. He knew somehow the man was trying to say that he was stupid, but he could never really figure it out. What do you want from me? Draco snorted again, but only for once, and he said, do you not want me to save him? Yes, Ron said, but if you want me to go rescue him, you will need to tell me who to go after. Malfoy blinked. Just tell me what Potter told you about his plan. What did he ask you anyway? I gave him my favorite book, so I know he wasn't stupid. Malfoy looked around and pulled his copy of the Diabolical Plan, a slim and darkly written text with a lot of symbols all over. Ron shrugged. Nothing, Ron said. Harry's been acting weird ever since I saw him after he saw it. He said that if there's any way to keep you safe, you better get off my back first. Ron stood up from the chair, looking towards Malfoy, who had gotten down next to it. And he gave me this potion, I think. Draco's eye twitched. So even Harry Potter doesn't think you're doing any good for him right now, huh? What potion? He asked, grabbing Ron by the arm. I think it's got something to do with me. Nah, I think instead of you and I, Ron said, not moving from his potion beside the table, are to do something important today. That is to get Harry out of danger, of being dead now. Draco groaned. Fine, get yourself a knife and some kitchen implements. Draco stood up from his chair, setting Ron on the floor and setting down his knife in front of him. Let's do this, Weasley, Draco said, and Ron, still standing up, did the same, taking out a large pot of small wooden lid and a knife from the kitchen drawer. It was going to be another long evening of fighting and shouting for Ron, so he gave him a small nod and a thumbs up. Draco and Ron took a moment to wonder what was the point of the whole experiment. If they could make a very important difference in this world, there were no other options. They needed to find a way to change the world that worked. Ron was a little concerned about what that meant for their future. Hey Draco, I'm not sure I like you, but you're just really cold and boring. You have such a weird face. Maybe I can help you. What are you talking about? Draco asked. Are you telling me you're going to be dead by the end of the day, or are you talking about how you have something to do with the world? And that is really scary. There's no time for that. I'm sorry, there's no time for that, Ron replied. He shook his head, and he had never said this before. You don't know, Draco. There's no way you could live that long with me. You'll die of starvation. It's going to be awful. It didn't take Draco long to realize what he had said. What are you talking about? This isn't what you are. You are a useless little rat. You are a useless little rat. Draco quickly shook his head and asked, Do you have your wand, or is that for sale at the thrift store? They were approaching the end of the hallway, where Harry and Ron had gone on about who was the stupidest, funniest, and most evil of their three best friends. Draco looked in the direction they had been. Okay, I need you to focus for one moment on you and Potter. Draco handed him the special stew they'd made. It was a very good mix, like lemon and sugar. It was everything that Harry and Ron would have wanted at Hogwarts. Ron was still confused. He wasn't sure if he was supposed to be watching him or not, but he wasn't paying attention now. Ron closed his eyes, remembering the conversation he had with Harry. The way Harry had tried to explain that he was the smartest person on Earth, but Ron had said that Hermione had to be smarter than him. Ron could always remember the sound of Harry's words. Ron smiled. They all knew who the evil one was. Draco let out a small gasp as he felt the chill of the night air on the back of his neck, and then felt like he could cry. It's not working, you idiot! Draco closed his eyes again and said, Don't cry, Draco, let it happen. I remember it all too well. I couldn't have done anything else. But it does make me so sad. I'm just a sad kid, and I think you are the worst. Ron opened his eyes, letting the stew fall to his lap. Draco felt the tears roll down his cheeks. He didn't know why the last person he had expected would love him so much. And now it felt like he was dying. He closed his eyes, feeling his fingers digging into the crook of his neck. He wasn't afraid anymore. Not anymore. A quiet voice broke the silence, but the cold was still coming down the stairs, just for him. Well, well, you don't like it when you cry. The boys turned to find the little prince looking up at them, a huge grin on his face. Oh, Draco, getting Ron to do something for you makes me happy. What a waste of a day. Draco's eyes filled with tears again, but he just shook his head. It's alright, I can handle it, and I can handle you. You're the only one left that I hate. I'm not going to let you hurt anyone. Ron was shocked at the sentiment. It came across as so sincere, but Draco didn't care anymore. The prince laughed, his eyes bright. Well, you're wrong, Draco. We were friends before. We were the very definition of fun. All our games were fun. We would run around and play all sorts of stupid things. But you see, I am the one who began the Great War. I am the one who was in the trenches. I am the one who fought the Nazis, and I am the one who fought the Soviets in Vietnam. I am the little prince who stood in front of the line. He drew his wand. And I want more, you know that. He looked at them. You think they love me because I'm powerful? They love me because I'm the only boy they're ever happy to see smiling. Because when I'm not, they see a dark cloud of blood on the face of the earth. Draco stared at the boy. I have never been happy before. He whipped out his wand, and he did what Draco's father had done so many times. He killed. He uttered the ultimate death curse. Doom. The young prince died in an almost gruesome manner, and when the flames burned his corpse away he lay still, staring at a wall, dead and unawake. Ron stared in awe, looking through the flames that covered that young boy's corpse, and saw a smile spread across Draco's face. "Oh God," he whispered, "that was just so perfect." Chapter 9. The Long Arm of the Law. Draco was standing triumphantly over the ashes of the little prince, while Ron looked about worriedly. He had not expected to die so young. He would miss his godfather so much. "Hey Draco, we should leave this dead boy behind us," Ron whined. "He's probably going to get mad at us, and I don't know what he'll do now." He turned, looked across at the hall and saw Fred sitting in a doorway, staring at the little boy's ashes. "What the hell are you doing here?" he demanded. "Oh, Ron, Ron," Fred said sadly as he looked down at the boy's ashes. "I'm doing my job, Ron, and not wasting any more time." "Yeah, all right," Ron said in a huff. "But what job?" he asked in an annoyed voice. Fred rolled his eyes. "Ron, do you know what we do for the Ministry of Magic?" He was silent for a while. "We're the Death Eaters and everything." A sudden flash of recognition flashed across Ron's face as the little boy's name appeared. "Oh my God, it's the little prince's name, isn't it? It's so obvious!" he exclaimed. "The boy is named Tom Riddle Jr. That means something." Draco smiled and nodded in understanding. "He is the son of Lord Voldemort and his wife Dolores Umbridge. He's supposed to kill Harry Potter and kill everyone he encountered. And he's never met anyone that he didn't believe was a dangerous monster. That's why we got along so well. I'm really glad to know this, but how come my brother is a Death Eater?" Ron demanded. "No reason whatsoever, Ron," Fred said in a rather exasperated voice. "But it explains why we were both good at doing our job. We both have a strong belief in Death Eaters, and we both believe our work is important." "I knew he was a Death Eater, I just didn't know it existed in the first place," Ron muttered, his voice becoming more irritated. Draco sighed and looked at Ron straight in the eye. "Weasley, please, no one is safe. You cannot let the Death Eaters live, not to mention all the other idiots that would do harm." He looked into Fred's eyes and whispered, "Do not look away. Don't talk. I cannot let you leave. You will not get out alive." Ron's expression changed from bewilderment to confusion as he tried to figure out just what the hell was going on. The whole ordeal was making him uncomfortable, and if anything, he felt more frightened. As he watched in fascination, Draco and Fred both waved his wands and began casting spells. "What do you think you're doing here?" Fred explained in a voice that seemed most sarcastic. He cast a stunningly powerful hex, shattering one of the chairs on the couch and knocking over another. "Oh, I just don't know. Maybe I'm fighting for the man I love. Maybe I'm fighting for my friends. Who knows?" Draco looked at Fred and cast a Patronus, taking on the form of a large bird and flapping his wings in the air. "We can always find out by looking at the birds," he added to Fred's bewilderment. "And if we do?" Fred inquired in a voice so dry it almost sounded like pity. He couldn't think of the last time he had seen any bird. The two men began circling the room searching for more furniture. It was an intense sight and if anything made them less than pleased. Both Draco and Fred launched an endless array of spells at each other, hoping at each other's expense. Ron, now thinking of Hermione's apartment, could barely get out his mouth what he had began muttering. What the hell is going on? And then a moment later, I have no idea what's going on. With those words, Ron's expression turned into one of the intense fear and he dropped his wand. This is stupid. Oh, I think it's quite brilliant, a voice said from beyond the couch. The two men froze in place in their chairs. A long dark line of magical power shot from the door into their room, lighting up the room. All the lights in the room went out and they all watched as a spectral figure appeared, floating in mid-air. Its body was made out of glowing red and purple light with tiny green eyes that seemed to stare back into the darkness. Do you understand who this is? It whispered. Ron tried to think of who it was, but nothing would come to him. Then he thought a thought. Oh, are you the boy who lived? The spectre spoke with a voice of magic that was somehow filled familiar with and magical. No, no, I am not the boy who lived. I am the prince who traveled through time to kill you. I am the Lord of the Dark. I am the little prince, Tom Riddle Jr. You are all nothing more than pawns in my plans. It is my will that I rule the world. I will destroy you all. I will make you slaves. I will give you everything I've lost. If it means your life, then that is what I will give it to you. What? We won't do it, Draco said with a shrug. Ron nodded. But what do we do then? Chapter 10. Harry is not dead. Deep in the Hogwarts morgue, Harry Potter was still breathing, though his heart had already stopped beating. After an instant's contemplation, Harry Potter decided that in the event that the heart stopped, he should be kept alive in some sort of heart chamber for a while longer. So he decided to take out one of his many healing charms to help him stay alive longer. This had been a great gamble for his future life with Draco. Harry Potter opened the small vial and immediately felt a wave of relief as an enormous amount of magical energy was transformed into his body. He felt the power come up upon him in waves, for each new wave until it was a complete storm. As the wave of power swept over his body, he felt a small wave of happiness begin to overtake him. But it was short-lived. Harry's body quickly felt the intense magical pain and he was unable to move an inch. What in God's name? I feel like a fucking moron, Harry screamed. Well, you should have been more careful with the magic this time. And your wand wasn't exactly powerful enough for such an intense magical charge. And your robes weren't particularly light enough, Hermione said from across the room. She rolled off the bed, revealing the long-tailed owl she had been hiding under her pillow. She held it at a 90 degrees angle. Harry had no idea how she managed to hide an owl under the pillow. It was obviously a good thing. Hermione seemed to have her own plan and had been the one to get the owl's attention. Well, it's actually the time for me to get out of there. Get out of here, she said. Hermione looked to Harry and gave him a sympathetic look. The owl stared at her and then turned. It was a simple white owl with a black feather perched on its chest. It was about 8 feet tall. Would you like to ride my owl up? We're going to get caught in this mess, Harry said quietly as the owl slowly lifted up. The owl slowly raised its head and turned before it vanished. The morgue was empty of owls. What do you think? Hermione asked curiously. It's an invisible owl. The owl's eyes twitched as they looked at her. That looks a little suspicious, Harry said nervously. This is a really strange owl. Don't worry, no one can see it. She helped Harry onto the owl's back. Goodbye, Morg. I'll call you later if you want to talk to me. With that, they flew the owl's body through the air. Harry was surprised. The owl would never fall. This owl's got eyes and he can see, Harry thought to himself. Hermione's invisible owl flew over the great hall with Harry and Hermione standing on top of it. When it finally landed in the middle of the large table, Hermione said, Come on, everyone, let's see who wins. Harry Potter will win. Harry and Hermione looked at each other and nodded to make the table. Harry looked at his watch. It wasn't too late. At least he was staring at his night early. He would get in the Hogwarts common room, change into his clothes, and take his wand and look out the window for a good hour or so. Then walk into the common room and walk up to Tom Riddle Jr., standing him up to look him in the eyes and tell him that the day has come for him to die. Hermione got off the owl as quickly as she was able, but after an uncomfortable silence for a moment she said, "I guess we should get going. I wonder how Ron's day has been. Do you think it was a good idea to put him through the ordeal? I mean, I know Ron's a bit of a brat, but he's quite good about being polite, you know." Harry looked to Hermione. "I know that he has trouble taking orders when he comes home, and he probably doesn't want to talk about me about it. So I'm pretty confident that he can handle it himself. I'm sure he's going to be fine." Harry smiled when he thought about it. Good old Ron was going to be okay after all, and Draco Malfoy wasn't going to be upset by anything. Harry Potter and the Little Prince, Chapter 11. Tom Riddle's Last Duel. Draco smiled. He had known of this particular scenario a million times. This was his time. It was going to happen. He wasn't afraid of death, but he was afraid that it would all end, that he would be left on the sidelines watching while his friends died or got turned into a living snake. Draco knew that this would be bad. There would never be a peaceful ending. He held his wand close to his chest, trying to calm the storm inside him. The spectre of the little prince spoke to Draco again. "I want you to learn that in order to accomplish everything you want, you will have to die in a way that will not leave you alive to learn the secrets of life. Your soul will be cast away from you, like all that has been consumed by the power of the dark." Draco chuckled. He was not a man to lose to a small boy. "You know, if you were not in a certain way evil, there wouldn't be anyone who wanted to do you harm. Maybe they just didn't like you. Maybe they hated you. Maybe they had no idea what you could accomplish if you were given the proper amount of time to learn magic." Draco's voice was very gentle. "If you all you wanted was to have the freedom and the opportunity to become the person that you are always meant to and live your dreams, you would be much happier without the death of those around you. But I guess you're a sad, lonely guy, aren't you?" Draco laughed and shook his head. His wand was glowing with a faint blue glow. It was a familiar shade of violet. Tom grinned in satisfaction at Draco's comment. "Well, I do think he's an amusing and quite humorous fellow." Tom's smile had grown wider. He raised his arms and magical spell began to form around him. He made a few gestures with his finger and formed a ring of magic around him. As his arms started to glow bright red, he looked up to see Draco with an open mouth, and he was surprised to see that Draco had begun to laugh in his face. Tom then realized he was actually holding Draco's wand, and felt a slight thrill in his chest. "Oh look, I have your wand now." Tom looked down at Draco and let out a satisfied sigh. Draco's eyes began to shine with light and his face grew more radiant. "Who says I need a wand?" Draco replied, his smile turning slightly wicked. "I have the power." Neither wizard wondered where Ron and Fred were right then. They couldn't hear from them or see them at all. The Weasley brothers were sitting on the living room couch, drinking red cup of tea. Ron eyed his brother with a sad look. "Mom's always saying that she had a bad case of twins. I just didn't think you were the cause." "I mean, how are you going to make her laugh if you're a Death Eater?" Ron frowned. Fred's eyes were narrowed as he looked up to his brother. "I can see your point," Fred laughed. "But then again, there was the time she got us all stuck under a lake for 7 years with all the magic in our house. And while she tried to sneak in the potions that she wanted, I wonder how much she was able to use. And there was the time I caught her and Lucius in an attack that killed 4 people and took over a million lives." "What? 4 people and took over a million lives?" Ron looked over at Fred. There were worse things he could have done that I have known of. Fred took a drink and shrugged. "It was in the war though, so she had all sorts of bad memories of it. We never really got a proper war story. I think my grandfather went into the war as a fighter and pilot, and won. So I'm just used to stuff like that." Ron didn't say anything and leaned back on the couch. As he did so, Fred got up and came down from his chair. "It's just, I've never been inside any of the dungeons." "The dungeons?" Ron muttered under his breath as Fred began to get up and walk. "Yeah, the dungeons that we never used to go into." Fred sighed and picked up his glass. "I suppose I never quite got why that was. I've been in there a lot, and it gets cold there sometimes. The dungeons are not as nearly as good as they used to be, so I haven't been inside as often in a while," Ron said with a side smile. So this whole Death Eater thing just comes across as such a big waste, really. Why can't you just go back to being like all the other kids that are just like us? Fred snorted. What? I'm not that big of a kid. I'm just kind of like a normal teenager. If I wasn't a Death Eater, I don't think I'd have ever done any crime. I know you want to do something about it, though. I'll let you know how things go, Ron grinned. Out in the hall, they heard Harry's voice shout in surprise. What the hell is that? Ron's eyes lit up. The boy who lived! Sorry, Fred, I need to tell you to shut up now. Before his brother could respond, Ron waved his wand again and the air went crazy. Fred was caught off guard, and the air erupted with magical power that made his body go stiff. He stood still for a long time as Ron ran to Harry. The scene in the Chamber of Secrets was one of Ron had never seen before, filled with an incredible amount of magical power, and no one was safe. Prince Tom Riddle was standing behind the barrier separated him from everything, and Harry Potter, the boy who killed him, was standing next to Draco Malfoy in the midst of his new magic world. There was a very dark, silent, beautiful smile on Draco's face as his wand flared in magic to kill a spectre, an angelic creature that has always terrified Ron. "Avengers!" Harry exclaimed as Harry fired a bolt of lightning at the dark creature that had soiled Draco's mind. Harry was a starry light, and he was holding his own. Its power was as unstoppable as if there were no god at all. But the prince just hovered there with that strange evil smile on his face. Across the room, Hermione Granger had just finished casting a Patronus charm to summon her mother's spirit in the form of a tiny red glowing woman. There was so much magical power and no one was safe. Hermione noticed Ron watching her from afar, and she smiled at him. "I didn't expect this. I suppose you'll have to forgive me." And she cast a charm on her own hand, making it invisible. "We aren't dead though, Ron." The evil spectre was just laughing at the children trying to kill him. They couldn't hurt it because it was a wizard, and all wizards have some sort of magic that can protect them from harm. It wasn't a charm, but one of those spells you had seen on some movies. "The Dark Wizard is back!" shouted the spectre with his tongue out. "He's here!" His laughter echoed in the school. Ron had been listening, but had only been able to make the sense of one thing. His friends and Malfoy couldn't kill the spirit. Hermione had only thought that she could, because her parents were still alive. But that was another story. Harry and Draco had fought hard. Both were alive, but it seemed like there wasn't much they could do against the curse of the spectre. It was up to Ron to save them. Ron raised his wand. "Hey guys!" he shouted at the four people he knew. "Get down on the ground if you need to. I'm going to finish this one myself." Malfoy looked at Ron in amazement, but then smiled with pride at his friend and turned to face Harry, taking his hand and pulling him down. "Come on, Peter, it's going to be fun." The little prince grinned at Ron with an air of confidence. "You think so? Well, come on, it's a school day after all. Let's get this over quick." With a slight swing of his wand, the spectre lifted his body up to the ceiling of the chamber and cast an instant wave of green light. Ron took a deep breath and closed his eyes. "Yeah, okay," and as he swung his wand around, he began to sing the chant that he's practiced since he was little. The Ron song. "The boy who lives, the sun that sets, and the moon that shines, and the moon never shines. And every day he takes the moon, we will be one again. It's Ron, Ron, Ron Weasley." His eyes were red and burning like they never left the fire. His blood-red hair shone like it burned up all the darkest night. And his voice was filled with rage and fear, but it wasn't just his voice was fierce. It was the whole of his soul. Ron was burning, his hands were filled with fire. Ron was boiling like the night. "I am not the boy who lives, I am the one who was born. I am the man that never lives, I am the man that never knows. My fire burns so fiercely, I am the Ron, Ron Weasley. This is the Ron that I love." The blue and green of the sky began to fade, and everything around them was transformed. The entire Chamber of Secrets were covered in dark, swirling mass of darkness that was much more intense than Ron's usual magic. When he finished his song, the whole chamber was completely silent. All around him was a sea of dark purple flames that seemed to come from nowhere, but slowly gathered and coalesced into an enormous pillar of black smoke that rose up into the sky above them. Then everything went dark. Chapter 12. In the dark, Draco lived. Everything was black, everything was dead, and everything was silent. Everything was nothing. Ron's song had become so good that even Draco was not able to escape. Draco had never seen anything so perfect, and now he couldn't. The only thing he knew was that everything he had imagined every day had been shattered with fear. The world was broken. He felt alone, alone. He wanted to escape it, to come back. He needed someone to take him away from this world. Someone that could love him again and not have the world destroy him. Someone who didn't feel like an evil idiot, but someone who cared and who loved him. What about his world? Harry Potter, of all people. He loved him like no other person, but everything seemed so dark, too wrong, too boring, and Harry Potter couldn't find him. He couldn't find Ron either. Maybe he was just dead, or had lost his mind. It didn't matter. He needed to find Harry because the world was empty, everything was dead, and only Draco knew how to live in that emptiness. So he went on living. He knew how to find him. He knew what he was supposed to do, and everything was clear in his mind. He even knew what to do when he saw him. Draco focused all his power on his wand, his mind and his body, and he felt no fear or doubt. He was confident. He knew he would find Harry. He wasn't going to do anything stupid, and he was going to make sure that Harry would never have to suffer for what was wrong with this world. He closed his eyes and breathed in deeply, his thoughts blanketing the world around him, and then the light came and he saw a beautiful boy with a perfect white face and perfect blue eyes. And there was something terribly important in him, something he wanted to protect. It was Harry. Harry Potter was standing on a snowy hill overlooking a vast field of green grass, where a beautiful white lake awaited him, and the sun was shining through the trees, making it so that the moonlight was streaming through the cracks in the trees and through the clouds that had begun to fall. He was smiling, his hair was shining, his clothes were elegant, and his smile was deep, warm, and loving. He was a hero. The entire world deserved to see him. But there was one very big problem. Potter, you are not here. You're not. I've got you, Draco said gently. He had his wand ready. What do you mean? Harry asked the boy who had been walking up to him. He was a little tall for his age, but he was beautiful. He was so handsome and strong. Of course I'm here, he said with confidence. I had a plan, a brilliant plan, a great plan. He smiled so much. He had tears streaming down his cheeks. I can see the plan, Draco said. He reached up and touched his mouth with his wand. A magical wave of magical force surged through Harry's chest, causing him to fall to the ground. Draco leaned down with his wand still in hand and whispered, "You're going to be fine." Harry groaned. "I can't even," he whispered, and in that moment Draco realized just how beautiful and smart Harry was. He was a wizard, so cool. "Yes," Draco said and looked down at Harry. "Your plan was brilliant. It was the perfect plan, but you know what? It was just a plan, and it wasn't working." He looked down at Harry's hands, and they were trembling like someone was trying to hold them. Draco shook his head and smiled. "It didn't work. It didn't work at all. And now you're stuck here waiting for something you're not ready for. So I have to tell you something." Draco started moving towards Harry. "What?" Harry asked. He looked down. His arms were shaking. "I know that I'm not ready," he said. "Potter, you've been waiting a long time." Draco looked up into his friend's eyes. His eyes were filled with passion. Draco looked deep into Harry's eyes. He touched his fingertips to the tips of Harry's brown hair. "Harry, I love you." He kissed his friend's neck softly. Draco's hands held Harry close in his arms. They were warm. "I want to tell you something," Harry whispered. Draco was breathing down Harry's neck, and Draco realized that he was shaking too. "I want to tell you what I'm not ready for. I'm not ready for you to go back home." Draco's mouth opened to say something, but Draco knew that Harry had already heard what he wanted to say. Draco took a deep breath. He leaned in and kissed Harry on the mouth. Harry's breathing quickened. Draco breathed out slowly into Harry's mouth. Harry's mouth felt warm and full. The kissing felt like a warm butter. It felt really good. The way that Harry moved around Draco felt good. It was like he was on top of Draco. He was being carried around like a bird. He was very sexy. Draco closed his eyes and let his thoughts flow. His mind wasn't in his head anymore. It was in Harry. Chapter 13. The Long Way Home. Elsewhere, Ron was fighting his way through the crowded corridor. He was on top floor, with only one door left to go through, which was locked with some sort of magical security. It made Ron really sad. He was fighting through his friends like a wild bull, and all of them were there. waiting for him, and Ron hated it. Ron would have preferred that they were gone. They were his friends, and they were going to make him miserable. "Hey," Ron said to the people on the top floor. "Can I talk to you guys?" he asked them. "Sure thing," they said, and started to walk towards him. Ron took one look at them and immediately backed up. Ron felt a hand wrap around his wrist and pull him away from his friends and through the door, closing it behind him. They were gone. He turned around to find it was Hermione Granger, Ron's best friend. She was smiling up at him and seemed to have been watching him from the back of the room. Ron was terrified and could hardly contain his emotions and kept shouting, "It's a trap!" Hermione sighed and leaned forward and kissed Ron on the forehead before whispering something inside Ron's ear. It was a spell she had just learned. The light came to Ron and made him see clearly and spoke to him. "We're in the realm of existence called the Dimension of Unknowns. In this realm there is nothing to do but fight your fears and the fear for a living, while trying to make sense of what you're experiencing. None of this is real." Hermione smiled as if they were just part of her job. Ron looked around. "Do I have a headache? Should I get meds?" "No." "No." Hermione reassured him and continued her description of the universe before Ron could even formulate an opinion. "In reality, there exist only 3 dimensions, 1, 2, and 3. They all exist in equal proportion and all are called time." She gestured at the universe around her as she went. She then noticed that Ron was crying. "Are you okay?" she said. She held out her hand and Ron shook it. Ron shook his head. "I don't know," he said. "Oh," she said with a sigh and gave him a hug. "Good to see you, Ron," she said as she pulled away, smiling. "Hey, Hermione," Ron said as she took a step forward to sit down. "How did you know where we were?" "We didn't actually," Hermione started to explain. "Harry and I had this plan to defeat the prince, but we didn't realize it would be a bad idea. It was too complicated. It made no sense. We just thought that that's a big threat, and we need to destroy him so the world doesn't get attacked again. And that's how it all came to be." Ron nodded and she went on. "You know, the thing about him that really interested me was his arrogance. He thought he could fly all around the world and kill everyone without a problem, and no one would care. He thought that he could be the best wizard on the planet, and when it became obvious that he couldn't have, he took what little glory he had and turned into an asshole, making fun of all those stupid people he thought had wronged him. The only thing I liked about him was his heart. It was always there, always, always, always. So we just went where his heart was, and ran into you and Draco. And that's the way it turned out." Hermione glanced around. "Oh, now we're in part of a dimension that looks like the Forbidden Forest," she said. "That's cool." "I've heard some stories about the Forbidden Forest." Ron looked at her for a moment. "It's supposed to be dangerous and weird and frightening. It's almost like the afterlife, but you know where the hell you are. This is where all the witches live. I think this is where all the witches die. That's why they call it the Forbidden Forest, I guess, because it's so empty." Hermione felt her stomach drop, and then it was just sitting there. "Ron, you've been there before. You know that stuff doesn't make sense." She sighed heavily. "Come on, I know the way out. It will never lead to hell. Just come with me," she said, and Ron followed her. She led them up a narrow path that curved past the ruined castle, where the trees were very thick and the path was flat. Then the forest was thick and greenery, a thick forest of trees. They passed through a small lake with small floating pools of water and then out to a river that was deep and brown and green and filled with birdsong. They walked down this path until they reached a small clearing where she led them out, saying, "Now we're getting somewhere. Let's take a look around." Ron looked around and saw that the place was full of trees, bushes, moss, and grass. He pointed at some of them. She didn't explain them to him. He took a look at the grass, noting its color, its pattern, the variety of colors there. This kind looks like the kind of grass that's growing here, I think. "Oh, and there's Harry and Draco next to some other flowers," he pointed. "Oh," she paused for a second, staring at them. "Oh my God, the way they're looking at each other now," she trailed off, frowning. "And the way they're kissing. Also, how they're running their heads up each other. hands up each other's. I guess it's like they're giving each other little tugs. She stopped and gave him a questioning look. He just shrugged, walking on through the clearing. I love how you can't even describe what this whole scene is about. I think they're just happy to be here. Hermione shook her head. I'm sure that when they're together, they're really into it. She glanced at her watch. We should get back. It's almost time to get dinner, and we should definitely be there, since I'm sure they want a snack for dinner or something, and I haven't eaten for quite a few days. Ron looked worriedly at her. We can't miss dinner at all. He went over to Harry and Draco and said, Guys, I'm hungry. They both jumped and looked at him in surprise. Harry rather looked embarrassed. Yeah, we're probably going to miss out on dinner since there aren't going to be any food stalls down here either. He mumbled as he pulled on his robe again, trying to look as composed as he could be. I guess we have to go to the Great Hall first, though. The head table doesn't allow any outside food. Draco laughed as he picked Harry up from the ground. What a load of rubbish. Wait, what, they're just going to throw us out? Draco Malfoy and Harry Potter, the best couple in history, are going to sit where they want and eat what they want to eat. No one wants eating around. No one wants them eating anyone else. He held Harry up in his arms and pulled out his wand. He paused, looking at Ron and giving them an odd look. Weasley, the song he sang. Ron nodded slowly. He knew his favorite song. That's a great song, Weasley. Draco smiled slyly. He looked like a baby that had just given birth, having only one hand free. Yes, Ron burst into tears. He wanted to cry all the time. It was so beautiful, he couldn't help it. Harry spoke up in a worried voice. Wait, what about Tom Riddle Jr.? Won't he get out too? Hermione snorted, walking up to the boys and looking at them straight in the eyes. Nope, there's no way for Tom to leave. He doesn't have any friends left. Harry frowned, but Ron was grinned. He just has the worst name, he said happily. Hermione rolled her eyes and turned her face away as she and Draco opened a portal back to the school grounds. It was just in time for the day at Hogwarts to end. Harry Potter, Chapter 14, the last chapter. Harry and his friends returned to the school, which was still in the rain, making things seem a lot calmer. The great hall, which Harry and Draco usually attended for breakfast and lunch, was already packed to the brim with students who had to have been in school for quite some time, since they were in the 7th year. Harry glanced at Ron, who seemed lost and confused, while Hermione seemed to have taken over Ron's mind. She seemed to be waiting for something. Ron, I think we should find out why all the doors are locked and what happened to the school library. Draco and Harry looked around at where there was so much crowd. Harry wasn't so sure if they were supposed to look at the crowd like everyone else was, but they didn't see a single person who wasn't in the crowd already. They were standing under one big banner. The banner read, I have to go now. Harry glanced at Draco, who looked confused as he tried to come with terms with how this all went down. But Ron seemed to be trying his best to put the pieces together to find a solution. Harry frowned. So where are the others? He asked. There's nothing but crowds here, and nothing else. Then everyone began to cheer them on from across the aisle. They cheered loudly and cheered more enthusiastically. The school began to move around them as everyone cheered in unison. The banner was slowly lowering down, and before Harry could think clearly, the great hall slowly moved, as if someone had decided to step on a piece of metal or something. It opened up to reveal a small stage in the middle, where several speakers would be seated. A giant man with a bull's head, wearing his glasses, stood on the stage, smiling. The bull was smiling at Harry. It was the headmaster of Hogwarts. Draco grabbed Harry's arm and started walking towards the bull, saying, Now, I know we're going to be all right. The headmaster spoke. Well, I hope that all of you are here to celebrate our victory. The bull's expression darkened slightly. His head was tilted to one side and his mouth was hanging open like someone was sucking on a small balloon. You four did pretty well, Draco. The bull began to raise itself and started dancing around the stage. Then a voice came from one side of the stage. It was the headmaster's voice. But before we start celebrating, it said, it is my pleasure to introduce Draco Malfoy, the great Malfoy. He's the head of Slytherin House, and I am proud to call myself the great Slytherin. Well done, Malfoy, well done. And all of your friends, well done. I'm awarding Slytherin 4 times the number of points as I did with other houses. Malfoy was silent for a moment, and eventually let out a heavy sigh. Thanks, Mr. Headmaster. I'll tell you a joke soon, and then all of you will be free to leave. Draco grinned at him, and then he was silent for a second. That was fun. Then the great Malfoy laughed loudly and swept Harry off his feet, causing a chain of 4 large lights to flash across the large area that had just been covered by Harry's shadow, causing everyone in the room to look around at the surrounding. Actually, how about we let Weasley tell some of the jokes? Potter? The boy's grin brightened. And my mouth will be busy tonight, and the next few hours as well. Harry just laughed and pointed at the ceiling. There are lots of jokes to be told. Ron's eyes lit up. All right then, let's do that. He pulled his cloak back up around him, causing his robes to quickly become a dark blue as they flew across the room. Harry smiled, relieved and grateful that it was his turn to get the jokes he already loved to hear, before returning his attention to the table that had just appeared before them. He and Draco sat down next to each other, while Hermione and her invisible owl watched over Harry, watching every word he said, almost as if he had to speak through them. Harry didn't mind. He just rested his head on Draco's shoulder and watched as Ron stood next to the headmaster and made a funny remark. As usual, the crowd did not really like Ron's jokes. That was the end of Harry Potter and the Little Prince. Thank you for listening.